All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and we got an amazing episode for you today. We are talking all things property negotiation and the things that you need to know next time you buy a property. And we got a very special guest. What do we cover, Ben?
Well, Bryce, it is a very special guest. We are talking about the art of speed, control, persuasion to get the outcomes that we're looking for, along with a lot more information from an industry and negotiating expert.
Folks, the mistakes that most amateurs make, we cover them today. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and of course, welcome back to you too, mate. How are you?
Well, mate, I'm good, but you, look, I've got to take you to task here. I mean, I think it's a bit rude of you to celebrate our loss so hard over the weekend that you lost your voice.
Yeah, there's
the Pies did lose, we know that, and we're out, but you didn't need to do that and celebrate so hard that you've lost your voice.
Well, there's only two reasons to drink, right? Freo wins a premiership, which means I'll stay on the bandwagon forever, and Collingwood fails getting into a grand final win. So,
I don't know. In all seriousness, mate, you've got yourself a little bit of a cold. Is that all? Yep.
Yeah. I've went overseas, got back over the weekend, and let's just say the last part of the trip was me horizontal, dealing with some stuff. So,
the good old travel lurgy. Yep.
Travel lurgy. Yeah. So, hey, how are you? Look, it's hard for me to be sincere and show a lot of remorse and care for you because I'm internally celebrating. But are you okay, mate?
Look, I've moved on, but there's a part of me that still holds on to a moment in the game where we were 12 points down. We had the momentum after Cox had his little soccer goal. Jamie Elliott completely gets front on contact or even chopping the arms, whichever free kick you want to pay.
Genuine attempt for the ball, mate.
Genuine attempt. Still made contact, ran directly in front. Had eyes for the ball. Don't disagree with that. Like, he was definitely looking up. But when you make front on contact, I thought that's the rule. Anyway, that killed us.
Okay, let's.
The ball went down the other end. I went to 18 points up. Only 6 minutes to go. Just basically everyone just so much, because you work really hard. I mean, it's obviously very, very difficult to turn a margin like that around. And that's how it can break spirits. It can break momentum, and that's what it did. So anyway, I think on the whole, though, that the Lions did play a better overall 100 minutes of footy, and that's what cost us.
Yeah, wow, mate. I think it was a stat the other day. I wish I could have remembered it, but it was like, I think it's in the 2014 of the 24 premierships, something like that, has been Collingwood, Brisbane, Geelong, and Hawthorn. I
think Eddie Maguire said recently when we beat the Crows, something like Collingwood has figured in a grand final every 3.5 years of our existence.
Yeah, wow. So
to your point about most of the time we're happy. So,
the rest is like happy to be in a prelim. So,
no, good luck. Good luck. I think Geelong's to lose.
Yes,
but
I got a ticket, Ben.
Yeah.
Great.
I got a ticket. Going along.
Yeah,
going along to see you.
I had this dilemma, right? That because I'm a Freo supporter.
Yes,
but I've got 4 Geelong memberships in this household, right? So we go to every home game.
Yeah.
My kids. So I'm in the motion of Andrea and the boys went to the prelim. Like I'm getting texts from overseas. Yeah, how good's this? So then the guilt starts to kick in because at the end of the season, Geelong sends a notification around, and to upgrade your membership, it costs you $240 to lock in a grand final. And I wasn't feeling like super certain at the time that Geelong.
Oh no, they've been the form team for the last
second half. Lock it in, right? So I'm thinking, well, and my mate around the corner goes, "Are you going to get one?" And he kept on hassling, and then in the end I went, "Oh, all right." So I rang the club and I upgraded one of the seats, and because I'm thinking, well then, I mean, I don't even know what I was thinking, if I'm honest, because now I'm like, oh, why didn't I just upgrade all four? So then I get into the ballot. Yep, I get my seat, and then we throw the other three into the ballot. Well, donuts. So I feel guilty because
I could live vicariously through your experience. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, they're your adopted team. It's always good to have a second team and have an adopted. But I like your loyalty. I like the fact, well, actually this year, if you go back to listen to a couple of your podcasts, probably wasn't a lot of confidence and loyalty. But I'm still glad you say you're a Freo supporter and you haven't transitioned to Geelong permanently.
No, that will bring me out of the drinking drought, Ben. I will have a drink when Freo wins one. So.
Hey, Bryce, and also before we get on to our great guest in today's show, obviously it's leading up. Next Wednesday is the 1st of October. Now, obviously, first home buyers can get access to the 5% deposit guarantee. So this weekend is potentially one of the last weekends where you might see a little bit of a spike in terms of interest in that affordability range. So again, we've got details in the show notes to learn more about that if you're a first home buyer looking to get into the market across Australia. We'll send you all the descriptions and information you can get in the show description. But definitely it's going to be interesting to see what happens from a demand point of view and whether that demand is spread out or whether that is concentrated in our capital cities.
It's bittersweet. Get extra access, but then all the other people get extra access. So it means you get in at a higher price, and
you run to your borrowing capacity. That's what you do.
Yeah. And of course, just summer series. We're about to launch into locking in that series. We've had some wonderful applications. So for those who have already done that, thank you. We're just doing a little sneaky shout out to the ladies, Ben. As is most of our summer series, there's an imbalance. I was going to say unbalance, an imbalance between the lads and the ladies, and we're just last call, fair offering, fair chance, ladies. Do we have anyone? Are you interested in coming on? Because if you are, we want to hear from you. The final spot is up for grabs. So if you have a story that you want to tell, either on the landed the plane or the silver lining, whichever one's is fitting to your story, we want to hear from you. So if you go to the property
and don't think when Bryce says final spot, it's probably already taken. We're gonna assess.
Yes.
We assess them on their merits.
Yes.
So and we've got a little bit of time. So put the applications in, and then we'll assess them on their merits. So please don't think, I've heard this a week later, and maybe they've probably got their final one.
Yeah.
No, we will make sure that we get a great story.
Yeah.
So if yours is a great story, please share it with us.
Please share it. thepropertycouch.com.au/my story. If it's you or someone you know, even if it's someone who's not a podcast listener that you think could be brought into our community and share their message with our community, please do that. Hey, we've got an incredible guest today that you and I caught up with just before I went away, Ben. And it is something we're super excited to share with our audience because Scott is at the peak of his craft when it comes to negotiating. And I think that as a podcast that is on the side of the buyer and a podcast that is very much on the lane of property being the vehicle of choice, combining those two things and getting you onto the property ladder means that you need to negotiate your position. And Scott comes with a wealth of information. So we're excited about bringing this to you, folks. And so without any further ado, let's cut to the interview Ben and I recently had with Scott Aggett. All right, folks, we've got a very special guest today. We are chatting with Scott Aggett. He is one of Australia's leading property negotiation specialists with 30 plus years
experience and involvement in over 4,000 property transactions, he's pioneered the negotiation as a service and now runs his own negotiation practice, helping buyers secure sharper prices and terms. Scott's here to open the playbook, the tools, the tactics, and the timing to help you win more deals. Welcome to the Property Couch, Scott.
Thank you, boys. Nice to meet you both. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. We're excited about today because I think the challenge we're going to have today is being able to condense what we want to talk about in a reasonable time frame. But
we could talk about this all day.
In 2016, you walked away from agency land of listing and selling to focus just on negotiating. Why'd you do that?
I hated it. I hated the person I was becoming, or I had become. I didn't enjoy the job for years before that. But I don't know if this is true for a lot of other people in different industries, but I stuck with it because I was making good money and it was the only thing that I knew. So I thought that was my path. I was a business owner, so I felt obligated to the staff and the team that were there and the journey that I'd sort of pre-committed myself on. And then I just got to the point where I was, yearning for something else. And that was, I really wanted to do something that was transformational in the industry. And I wanted to attack the part that I thought was the obvious problem for me, sitting in the agent chair, watching how buyers transacted. And that was, they just didn't have a clue how to negotiate and they were overpaying. And that was impacting their days on market, impacting, their overall budget and the journey that they had, that they just didn't enjoy. So I thought there was an opportunity for me to go and do something that I loved, which was the negotiation aspect of it.
Can we double click on do you reckon the staff and all that knew that it was a challenge for you, or were you able to sort of compartmentalise, what it was that you were not liking about the job? And can you sort of unpack that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, tell our audience who don't understand the land of listing, why'd you hate it?
Yeah, I mean, the job really is to overquote to convince a vendor to come to market, and then underquote to buyers to create competition, to give them a value proposition to come along on my open for inspections on a Saturday. That part fundamentally was the issue that I had, that I couldn't lay straight in bed, that you had to lie effectively to win. And I still believe that's probably true today. Not much has changed based on who I speak to in the industry that are still friends that are on the agent side. So that was an issue for me. In terms of answering that question about the staff, I mean, the obvious things for me, I don't know if it was obvious for them, is that I couldn't come in and do what my colleagues would call dial for dollars. It doesn't sit well for me that you just sit there and cold call people to try to extract money out of them. That was just the wrong, framework for me to be able to turn up to work and do a job. So this probably started back when I was in London working in the property game, but I was a great cherry picker. And by that, I used to use almost like a business card Rolodex with my buyer briefs on it. I would find a new listing, I would go through my Rolodex, I would match up those properties very quickly. And I found that much easier to do than sitting there dialing for vendors. So I was very good at matching buyer briefs. I was, less of a performer at possibly listing. And then that was probably pretty obvious to my business partners at the end that my core focus wasn't on that side of the business. Yeah. So from that perspective, they would understand it. But I don't think the frustration was shared with everybody else in the industry, and most of those people that I was working alongside are still plugging away at it today, and none the wiser. And I think some people think of these things at a deeper level, and some can operate at a surface level long term and make a very good living out of it. And I think money sways that, right? It's a high earning industry and
low barrier of entry,
very low barrier of entry.
Yeah. So let's just sort of again talk to this story of you've got a listing. And let's say it's a relationship breakdown, and you've got to try and not tell the new buyer that it is a forced sale because you're trying to hold the cards close to the chest to get the best result for your vendor. What are some of the tactics or languages that did feel uncomfortable when you're trying to withhold certain information?
Yeah, well, I guess the opposite of that is true as well. Sometimes
yes, exactly.
People would expose that information to give themselves an opportunity to get a result in a faster way.
Okay.
Again, these are the games that are going on inside like that. You're dropping in these little bits of information that are private to get yourself across the finish line sooner. I don't know, from an agent's perspective, I think I was pretty good in terms of protecting the client's interest in that regard. I would really work on setting the sale up by creating competition for the buyers. So rather than focusing on the weakness potentially in the sale campaign from my side as the agent, I would focus on exploiting the weaknesses of the buyers. And I think that sets me up very well today for what I do representing buyers, is I know what the agents are going to do to press my buttons, that they know they've got a higher percentage chance of me taking a particular step and gets them the result they need. So I can circumnavigate that to our advantage.
Just we've got a lot to chat about, and even to the question of where you've been and where you are now. It's just such a dramatic shift from even mindset and enjoyment around some of the things that you have to say to vendors and buyers to get a deal done. Whereas when you're on this side of the fence, acting for the buyer, it's just a totally different game for you.
Breath of fresh air is the term.
Yeah. So we're going to go into that in a fair bit of detail shortly. But hey, we like to get our audience to understand you a little bit, and we're keen to change the narrative around talking about money. So we're interested to know, is that something that you chatted about with your family when you were growing up? And if not, why not? And if so, what did you talk about?
Yeah, interesting question. No is a simple answer. We didn't talk a lot about money. Definitely came from a sort of hard-working, working-class family. My dad changed a few different businesses along the way, working with his brother in and out. So I saw him kind of take different opportunities, which I guess maybe sort of planted the seed a little bit more in terms of being able to roll the dice, change paths in your career, maybe be a little bit entrepreneurial. I don't think Dad was quite entrepreneurial. It's his birthday today. Rest in peace, Snags. I don't know. So money wasn't really a thing that we talked about, and maybe it was because we didn't have a lot of it. We certainly didn't kind of want for a lot, but they did really instill a real hard work ethic into me. Like, I had a paper run with Dad when I was really young. I was good at tennis, went to play tennis in America and Canada when I was a kid. Mum and Dad said they'll match every dollar if I want to go. So I car washed with a bucket around Epping in Sydney to raise the money, and selling chocolates at tennis and doing those things. So I had all those good examples from my parents at an early age that if I wanted it, I had to go work for it. But we didn't really talk about forward planning and saving and those things.
And so when you got your first job, the paper round or whatever, and you were doing that, so it sounds like you had purpose for that money. You were saving up for those types of events. What about the pressure of the peers and the BMX bikes, or keeping up with the Joneses or anything like that? Did you feel any sense of that when you were growing up?
Yeah, there was a little bit of it in Epping where I was. My parents probably kept me very well grounded like that because they just weren't flashy at all. So we didn't really have anything that was super expensive and didn't have those sort of tastes. Wasn't until I got to probably more like 18 or so 19 until I realised there was a whole other world out there, and then I was probably that was the start of probably being wasteful with money, the money that I had saved. But I went on to, for right or wrong, my focus was enjoying life, and enjoying life for me was travel and spending money with family and friends. So, if I did save money and I worked really hard, I would spend it on experiences rather than just waste it on buying stuff.
And in terms of the whole concept of investing and delayed gratification and so forth, not quite in your wheelhouse at that age?
No, not at all. It wasn't at all. So I started buying property when I was 21 in London. I bought 2 apartments in London right from the start. My best mate there that I worked with at Foxtons, I asked him to lend me £4,000, which was pretty brave for someone that knew me for 6 months at that point. I bought an apartment. I flipped it 3 months later and made like £40,000, and that was the start of it. And that was probably the start of my undoing in some regards as well, because I got the bug for flipping. So I'm up to, I don't know, probably 30 something now. But I should have kept, a number of those properties, and I would have been substantially further ahead now than where I was, than where I am.
A lesson that most of us can always look back on.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say unfortunately, because for some people who get flipping right, there's a fair bit of coin in it. I guess the lesson is, did you store it or did you spend it? And
spent it. Spent it, hence the regret.
Yeah. So to close out that loop, brothers and sisters?
Yeah, 2 older sisters.
Okay, similar mindset around spend for experiences or a different sort of, because I'm always conscious about, nurture nature in terms of how siblings read, and observe their life growing up, and then, how they then become, what is their psychology of money, even though they've grown up in exactly the same environment, they have different views on money. Are they similar or
Chalk and cheese.
chalk and cheese? So very conservative.
Very conservative.
I love it.
Not flashy at all. I would go buy the Porsche and my sister would just go, "Oh my God, you're such an idiot." I'd go on a business class flight to Europe and my sisters would go, why do you do that? Why do you take your 2-year-old in business class? I'm like, well, because she can sleep. Then I can sleep. It's my holiday and I work really hard.
Isn't it so you can take a photo and have evidence if she ever said there was a really bad upbringing, you can just show that photo to judge. But I guess you've hinted London. I know that that's in your backstory. Can you tell, clearly you're at the other end of 30 years of lots of experience, but fill in the gaps. What was the spark for real estate? What was the entry into it? And what was the pathway to now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably more than 30 years because I did school work experience with a cousin-in-law, Peter Matthews, who's just stepped down as the REI New South Wales head. So Pete was a really high-profile real estate agent. We went to school together. His brother married my sister, my older sister. Pete, was my sort of role model, if you like, not in a weird way, but he played water polo. I played water polo. He was first grade rugby captain. I played rugby. He went to play for Eastwood. I went and played for Eastwood. He went to be a real estate agent. I went to be a real estate agent with him. So I kind of followed him around a little bit at that age.
Good to have mentors.
Yeah, totally. And he was a great mentor. He was just so determined and focused to be successful. He had a great, mental outlook in life and still does. Pete worked at Ray White Bankstown and he had a white Mitsubishi Magna and I thought he was the king. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we grow up and what we're influenced by and,
totally.
having
It's
those.
got the right blend of sports and executive.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's living the dream, really.
Yeah. Set of 18-inch, plastic mags or whatever it had on. It would look sweet. But Pete had Pete had the bad suit, I'm sure, back then and just looked the part. And he then went on to be a director of Ray White in New South Wales. So when I finished school, I did the year full-time course at TAFE. And then I worked with Pete for 3 years at head office. So I worked at head office and then I worked at Linfield, then I worked at DY for Ray White, mostly in property management. But in head office, I was collecting all of this is probably, the reason I raise this is probably an important part of my journey. At head office, I set up the auction room for all the in-house auction rooms when Tony Fountain was the chief auctioneer. So I got to watch hundreds and hundreds of auctions every month, which was really great theatre for me to learn what was happening in the room. I also knew, and I was asking lots of questions about what the reserve price was and tried to learn the game and watch what the agents did. And most importantly, every month, my job was to collate all of the figures that they were writing, every office in Australia, and collate them all and put them into a spreadsheet for Brian White. So I could see in real time what Ray White Surface Paradise, Ray White Double Bay, and all these offices were doing and seeing these enormous numbers that were just not real. And behind the scenes to actually see how much money they were making. And that was really interesting for me to say, okay, wow, there's a big opportunity here. And I was lucky I was sitting next to Sam White, who then went on to, at that point, build Loan Market. So that was right at the start of it when Sammy came back. So I just was surrounded by good people that were going to go and do really big things.
So that was after the UK? Or before?
No, that was 18 to 21, and then went to London at 21 to 26.
Yeah, okay.
For chasing adventure or chasing profession?
I was playing rugby at Gordon, and some of my rugby mates were going to go to London and play football, and I wanted to go to the snow, so I went to Colorado as a snowboard instructor for a season, and on Australia Day in 1999, I wrapped myself around a tree and nearly died, and that was kind of the end of that. So back to Australia to have surgery. And then I was kind of at home with Dad by ourselves, and I'm thinking, well, my mates have already gone to London. I don't have a job. I can't walk. I'll do the rehab here, but I'm just going to go back. I'm going to go to London anyway. I'll just go be a real estate agent. I'll find my feet. So I got the working holiday 12-month visa. Yeah. Got a job within 2 weeks of landing at Foxtons, which at that time was... again, really kind of influential in my life. Foxtons was McGrath's, beacon of light. That's basically John built McGrath to almost look and mimic Foxtons. And I was there at Foxtons before that. So I had that kind of front row seat to a really cutting edge business globally that was doing something really cool. So that was great. And they were just a really dynamic business. So I worked there for 9 months. I would have stayed for longer, but I got poached by another agency on the street, and they were able to sponsor me for 5 years, and that was the only way for me to stay. Yeah. So I took that job and then got re-sponsored again for another 5 years by another business.
What were the quals that you needed? Could you transfer the experience that you had, or was there any sort of qualifications that you need to get over in the UK?
No, there was nothing. It was just walk straight in. So I started in a leasing role, a letting clerk.
Which is typical over there, right?
Yeah, and it was fantastic because that was the start of the Rolodex for me. That was like, okay, great. Well, my boss, Alan, I'm still mates with the Danish guy who was a really great boss, would bring in, 30 property management leads a month, and he would just sort of write them on a board, and I'd have my Rolodex of all the inquiries, and I'd just bang them out, and I was doing 6 a week. I was getting paid incredibly well. I got a car, I got a phone, I had everything. And at 21 in London, none of my friends that were all backpacking, they had no money. And I was earning £80,000 a year at 21, which was back then was a lot of money.
Absolutely.
For doing that job. Yeah.
So tell us about the actual pivot to negotiation, and I'd love to sort of get a better understanding of why you thought that was the lane that you could excel at, and where you, I guess, saw the gap in the market.
Yep. Well, I did. So when I came back from London, I did 3 Belle property franchises in the eastern suburbs, the first 3. So I built those from scratch. And that kind of gave me the experience that I needed on the ground to understand the Australian property market and selling in particular. And through that point, probably the last 8 years or so of that, I had the idea that morphed into Hello Haus, which is the business that I did for the last 8 years or so. And that was born out of really what I said at the start, like watching the buying process, understanding how buyers navigate that and the poor outcomes that they were generating. And then my love of negotiation. And so I used to say to my wife, I wish all I could do is just negotiate all day. And I said that to her 100 times, to the point of which she probably just said, well, just go and negotiate all day, like go and find a path to do that. So I knew deep down that that's what I was good at. That's what I enjoyed doing. And I was good at it because I could out-negotiate the buyers very easily, and I could close deals really fast. And I thought, well, there's something that I'm passionate about. And I think that was the perfect timing for that then to come to light in terms of what I did with Hello Haus, or the idea, was watching the rise of buyer's agents in Sydney at that time. So that's when I first met Veronica and other people like that. Actually, I knew Veronica when she was an agent at Sarah Lawden before that as well, so 25 years or so ago. But when you watch the buyer's agents come through, it was typical at that point that I would see you, Bryce, for 3 months or 4 months as a buyer. I'd build rapport with you, we'd get on nicely, I'd be showing you opportunities pre and off market, the normal relationship for a buyer and agent. But then I would see someone, I'm not referencing Veronica here, but someone else, another buyer's agent like that would come through, that would then be representing you, and you'd be sort of out of the picture. You'd still be here coming to the properties, but now I'm talking to, Jim instead of Bryce. And then all Jim wanted to do was, smash the door down and buy that property as quickly as they possibly could. And they were effectively paying a premium with a cherry on top. And they constantly wanted to get access to these properties at an earlier stage, and they were prepared to pay an enormous premium. So I was looking at going, well, the only reason I'm selling you these properties is because I can't perceive that I can beat this by running a month or a 6-week campaign. So I'll take that offer. I'll advise my client to take it. I thought, well, if this is what buyers are doing, if this is the future of real estate, there's more smoke and mirrors on the buyer's agent side than there is on the agent side. They're getting absolutely rorted by the trusted professional that they're paying an absolute premium to represent them. So I thought there's got to be there's an opportunity here. Where's the opportunity? And the opportunity for me was like, okay, well, there's no transparency, because that was the issue that I had being an agent. So there's no transparency with the buyer's agent, and there's nothing performance driven about this at all. So if I can build a performance-driven negotiation service that's completely focused on transparency, this will be the first of its kind.
What do you mean by performance-driven?
I want to be able to quantify the amount of money I save you in the negotiation. Yeah.
But that can be an anchor for you too, because part of, as you know better than most, part of the negotiation process is actually just jockeying for position so you can get it in the first place. It's got nothing to do with how much you save. It's got everything to do with being in a position to buy it in the first place. So did that become a crutch after a while if it was all about how much money you saved?
It did, and that's a really good way to sort of reframe that. And that was the cause of the problems that I found straight away when I launched the business. So I launched it as Australia's only no-win, no-fee negotiation service. Stupid me. So and it worked great in terms of generating a lot of media, and I had a lot of media contacts. And that I still do a fair bit of work with now. So they were really happy to take that story, which gave me momentum, and it did get my first customers and started to morph into a real business. But the more that I advertised how much money I was saving below the client's target price, which is their sort of maximum walkaway line in the sand, the more the next customer came in, went lower just to set that bar at a level where they didn't have to pay. So I dug my own hole there, and then very quickly had to work out, okay, great, I need to put a retainer in this as a barrier of entry, and then increase the retainer, kept a performance fee element of it, until sort of over 8 years we ended up losing the performance fee and just making it a higher retainer. And that was because no matter what I did genuinely to do the right thing by people, the Australian consumers or the public still can't get it through their mind en masse that we were there to protect them and do the right thing. They just get stuck in this mindset of, yeah, but you're going to take 15% of anything that I save. So that's too much. I'm like, yeah, but that's 15 cents in the dollar. You're going to make 85 cents in the dollar what I save. So I'm motivated to save as much as I can.
That you weren't going to spend. If I could
Correct. Yeah. It's ironic, but that was the problem that we had. So it wasn't really until we got rid of the performance fee that the business actually took off, which is counterintuitive to how I set it up.
Yeah, you're trying to save the money. I mean, I've had long debates. We're in the same boat. We've, about 4,500 purchases that we've done in terms of trying to get that. Trying to, quantify how you are going to save based on their budget versus what the market is, what the market's going to be. I mean, when we hear people talking about, I got it below market, some of that is like, well, actually, the market's going to pay what the market's going to pay. And in some cases, when we're competing against other competition, the price is going to find its equilibrium or its price point. So you can still be potentially the best negotiator and still miss out. Like, if someone's just got deeper pockets, you can try all your tactics. But here's the point I wanted to make. In a lot of cases, there's still the opportunity to influence the outcome. A lot of people just automatically think, you're not going to influence the outcome. Whoever's got the deepest pockets is going to win this. And it's not true. It's not always true, is it? I mean, you can be in an auction and you can intimidate another group who might have coming to the auction had a higher price point that they would go to, but they just intimidated on the day thinking that you were going to pay more.
There's two things that I think are crucial about that. One is you're paying an expert negotiator, and it goes hand in glove that they also have to be an absolute gun analyzer of property value.
Yes.
Okay, and that's the first mistake that the public make. They don't know how to analyse property effectively. So part of being able to quantify the amount of money that we save is being transparent on the accuracy of our appraisals.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There's no one in the industry that is accountable. So there's no one that's accountable on the agent side. I can go in and tell you whatever number I want, and then I'm going to beat you down over 4 weeks, and you'll take whatever the market's going to set. Okay, so there's no accountability there at all. And there's no accountability on the buyer's agent side as well, because I can fudge the numbers just like you can for my 4,500 deals and say, well, look, there's interest at 780, but I can find comps at 810 that you're going to need to pay to buy this, and you'll pay 810, and you'll feel like you paid the right price, but you overpaid by $30,000. I can make that happen very easily, and so can you. And I don't think that a lot of the market realise that if you're dealing with an inexperienced buyer's agent, that you're at risk of significantly overpaying because they're very lazy, they're not experienced in analysing property effectively, and then it becomes transactional. Yep. So part of the value in that is understanding how to analyse properties. I agree the market will set the price, but the second point of that I wanted to make is that a good negotiator knows when to walk away.
Yes.
So the market may well set a price, but it's got no relevance to where I see comparable sales evidence, at which point I'll say to my clients, there's no value here, walk away, there'll be a better deal.
Yeah, so
you're paying for that value.
Correct. And so that's why we track the deals that we walk away from or the deals that we miss as much as we track the
success.
Because that's, because again, it is a little bit subjective, right? I mean, even with a valuer, you can get a bank valuation that's 5% off compared to what, another bank valuation comes in at. And so it is, it's a subjective art in terms of that. But I totally disagree. I totally agree with you in the sense that, the skill of doing the comps work and being conservative on those is really, really important.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that buyers make is property is not a it's not an exact science
No.
in terms of pricing property, and it's very difficult to price emotion. So there's two key challenges in terms of property analysis.
Yes.
But the thing that buyers miss the most is how to price in the difficulty in replacing that asset. How hard is it to replicate? Yep. So, and that might be that there's a 3-bed house that rolls in every 20 minutes on the clock, like the next tram in Melbourne, in a certain suburb, and if you miss this one, there's another one 20 minutes down the road. But is it going to be once every 3 months that this rare 3-bed comes up at this price point in this pocket of the suburb, at which point you need to price in that uniqueness and the heat in the market? So it's understanding those nuances as well as just looking at comparable sales evidence and competing listings that are on the market at the moment. There's a lot more to it. And I think these are the things that just go lost in the new wave of buyer's agents that are coming into the industry. Who is teaching them this stuff? No one.
They're learning on the job and making the mistakes.
Well, they're learning with your money. They're getting paid very well to learn with your money.
Yeah.
We like them to, delivering babies. If you want your baby being delivered, you want someone who's done it 1,000 times, not someone who's done it 3 times. And it's where in the buyer's agency world do you get to bridge the gap between desire and experience without actually doing it with clients' money? And that's the big challenge.
Yeah, and if they've only done 3, ask them what's their apprenticeship. Who have they studied under?
Yeah.
Like you did an enormous amount of apprenticeship to get to the skill level that you've got to.
Yeah.
And it is a skill. I mean, it is an art, but it's a skill. It's like an artist. Some artists are priced at there's a reason for that. They're very skillful and they've done the arts. So if they might be enthusiastic amateurs and they're only on their 3rd purchase, but did they work in a group for 5 years or 10 years before that, and they've watched 500 transactions and they've helped with, comping 200 properties, and they're doing that type of work. That's the type of research I would want to ask a new buyer's agent to market, in terms of show me all your research. So show me how you comp. Tell me that you've got the skill to know that I'm going to buy.
Well, that's
the
the
right
challenge,
area.
isn't it? Because for a lot of buyers agents, it's still a cottage industry, and what they do is they go, well, there's a one person buyer's agent, and they want to put on another one, but they're not sure if they can back themselves in, they get more clients, and then whereas if you've got a bigger buyer's agency, like our program was, we can get people through our academy program, largely because there's that opportunity, that margin for us to think about, okay, we want new buyer's agents coming up in the future. We've got that bandwidth.
One of the things I was going to say on that as well is the thing that makes me cringe in the industry is watching the newer buyers agents running these negotiation masterclasses, and this is obviously close to my heart.
Yes.
It's protecting that little skill set that I've honed, as you say, for 30 odd years. But you can't be a master of anything if you've only seen one side of the transaction. And this is why I'm so bullish on saying, if you're going to come in and act on behalf of a client and spend hundreds of thousands or millions of their dollars, you need to understand how the game's played from both sides of the fence. Otherwise, you're a master of nothing. So even if, your point, you've done 3 deals, even if you've done 300 deals, you still don't know how to negotiate like the person that you're negotiating against, because even though I might have done X amount of deals as a real estate agent, I'd be negotiating against 7 or 8 or 9 people live to get one deal across the line. So you just get so many reps in. It's just like going to the gym, right? You just get so many more reps in being on the agent side of the fence to understand how people think, what buttons to push, which lines to use at a certain time is going to give you a higher percentage chance of moving the needle. You have to have that level of experience, I think, to be really effective on the other side.
Scott, the conversations we've had, I know that that your leverage is largely in the private sales space. You don't love going to represent at auction. What happens if you, because the strategic advantages disappear? I'm happy for you to double click on that in your response. But what happens when you've got a client who wants a property that needs to go to auction? What can you unpack that? Why you prefer private over auction, and then what happens if you need to go to auction for a client?
Sure. Well, really, with an auction campaign, and I was an auction agent, so I can speak confidently about this, it refers back to what we discussed up front. You overquote to win the listing, underquote to drive competition and emotional interest in a home. So the more buyers that they can get to the table, when you go through it as an end user, you're obviously going to look around and say, geez, there's 10 people here or 20 people here. There's a lot of interest in this home, right? Everyone plays on that, and then they drive that emotional connection all the way through to auction day, of which they're put under a blowtorch to pay an emotional premium. Mm-hmm. They use the same in reverse to smash down the seller under hammer in those same extreme stressful conditions. So you really lose all control if you're going to an auction to compete against that, because it effectively ends up, you might have a few psych out skills, whatever, that you can change, but effectively...
It doesn't work all the time.
No, and it rarely works, I'd say. The reality is the person with the hand up last in the deepest pockets is going to win that auction, and usually that's an emotional end user, and typically they've had time, certainly in many of the capital city markets, over that 4 weeks to go back multiple times for more in love, tap up bank of mum and dad, sell their crypto, do whatever they've got to do to prep themselves and put them into a position where they can pay overs if they need to. That marries up really nicely with the average time on market of 10.1 months in Australia, that by the time they get to that point, after they've usually statistically lost 5 times, before they then overpay on the 6th to stop the fight, leading to 45% of Australians reporting to have buyer's remorse, right? So you're competing against all these people that want to put the flame out.
Yeah.
So the best way to do that when you're buying is to upset that apple cart and throw a cat amongst the pigeons as quickly as possible at the start. Now, you do that and you cut out a lot of people that haven't had a chance to get emotionally connected to a property.
Get organised, yep.
Aren't prepared to pay overs that they perceive it is based on what the agent is underquoting. And I'll give you a good example of this. I lost one yesterday in Sydney and Lane Cove at 4.1 million. Guide price was 3.5 million, which was a piss take.
Wow.
My first offer was deliberately just over 10% above their range because I just wanted to call them out on it straight away. So I offered 3.875, knowing it was going to get rejected straight away. I had a 4.1 million target price from the client, which is what we thought it was worth. Yeah. So rejected, want to go to auction, whatever. I know they've just got tons of interest and they'll have interest above that. So instantly said, okay, great. Well, I listened to you say it's got to go to auction, no more offers. But then I called straight back 10 minutes later and said, yep, cool, but I'm going to make another offer anyway, 4,025,000. So a big step up, another 150 grand, and much closer to where the target price was. So all again happening really quickly, unconditional, deliberately to throw a cat amongst the pigeons, as I say. And then you really work out whether they're going to crunch you and sell, or crunch their vendors and sell, or if they've got other buyer interest. So all I've done is just bring forward that auction campaign so that we don't have to drag this out for months. We can just get it over and done with in our terms really quickly. We flush them out, buy the deal, or we move on. So really that's what I'm trying to do all the time, is get to these properties at an early stage, use speed and leverage and control to my ability. And usually that allows me to buy it below what we believe it's worth. That's where I make a lot of my wins from the clients.
Yeah, so that is one of sort of your techniques that you do talk about, which is speed. You referred to control, but also that pressure around that. So take us through an example of how you might bring that urgency in that and that pressure along with that speed and control that you're trying to do.
Let's just workshop that deal.
Yeah,
if you
sure.
want to. So I'll be very specific with it. So I tried to ring the agent multiple times. She was dodging my call because she knew I wanted to make a pre-auction offer. In the first phone call at 7:00 on the Friday night before I made the offer on the Monday, so they just listed it before the first open. I rang her and I said, asked her the whole list of questions to establish where the price needs to be. She was very bullish that it had to go to auction. For the reason her vendors were in the 90s and they didn't want to be anxious, blah, 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 whatever. There'll be a line always from an agent there to drive their narrative towards an auction.
If they're confident they're going to have a lot of interest, they're going to...
Exactly. Quote it low, watch it go. So that's exactly what the game they were playing. So at that conversation, it's important for me to drop in an anchor point, which I'll come back and circle to later in the process. So drop that anchor on Monday night. Yep, we've got another property that we're interested in Roseville. We're going to go and look at that property as well tomorrow for a second time. I use the word preference. It's key for me in negotiation. So very clear to say this is their preference. However, I'm telling you I've got a second option up my sleeve if you're not prepared to pay ball here. Fast forward past the weekend. Let her do her callbacks because she's got to do that. They can't make an educated decision until they've done that anyway. Then go for the throat in terms of an unconditional offer. We'd had all our ducks lined up already and the contract reviewed. Building and Pest was done. Made the offer, we rejected, and then we moved very quickly from there. But the whole point I'm referencing that Roseville property, she wouldn't answer my phone call, so I put her in an email and I would use the lines like, we're committed to buy this pre-auction. We understand your clients, I've got empathy. I understand your clients don't want to sell prior. However, we've got a second property. It's our preference, as I've already discussed with you on Friday. So therefore, almost don't shoot the messenger, but I've got to play this card here now. And I'd love to get your client's instructions to see if there's a deal here. And just fast forwarded the whole thing and crunched the time.
Now, in pretty much every state and territory in Australia, we also have provisions in the law around quoting and underquoting.
Yep.
And so when you put that 4,025,000 on the table, how much are you coaching the selling agent about their obligations and responsibilities now to move, the deal higher and get that information updated on all the collateral and everything like that? Are you putting that type of pressure on the agent as well?
Yes and no. Depends on the agent and who it is, because some of them will push back on that. And I'll give you another example live of this that's happening right now where an agent's pushing back. That agent did move this is how they play the game. They change it from guide price $3.5 million to contact agent in New South Wales. So that just kind of basically nothing changes except they just make it less transparent again for the consumer. They did move the back end price though to above where our offer was. So the search moved, which is good.
Yep.
And then when I made the second offer, the higher offer, I was just over plus 15% above the guide price. And I made it very clear in the email that this is a long way above your guide. In other words, I'd love you to take it real serious. That's not a threat, but it's kind of like a very direct, hey, we're in the land of, we're a long way over what you quoted.
That's the pressure piece in terms of, I suspect, what you're pulling forward.
Yeah. I think the key is because you've been in their shoes, you understand what they're experiencing, you know the conversation they're going to have with the vendors, you know all of the tactics that they're doing, so it's kind of gives you a bit of a strategic advantage there as well. Anchoring. Let's talk about that because amateur buyers do that piece really poorly when they introduce other properties in the wrong location. You do it strategically. Can you double click on that? Because I think it's really important.
So the first thing that's really important to say is I don't do it all the time. I'm not a one-trick pony like that. So it's not something that you just roll out on every deal because agents can see
they're going to get sick of it from buyers agents anyway, right?
Yeah. But it is strategic for me that I use that tool very often. And often it's the truth, because what I do when I take on a new client is say to them, listen, you may fall deeply in love with 12 Smith Street, but 12 Smith Street may not fall deeply in love with you. So go find Jones Street or Union Street or wherever else, because you cannot stop until there's a signed unconditional contract done with your name on it. So very often they'll have a backup property that they're interested in as well. It may not be at the same level of the one that they've got an interest in that's their preference, but I like to have a second one that I can reference that's naturally easy to introduce into the conversation, even to some points of naming that property and saying, well, look, they're also on Union Street. It's not, there's challenges with that one. Again, I come back and pump up their tyres on this one. Smith Street's beautiful. Like it's in the right spot of the suburb. The layout's lovely. That back part where they've opened it up is gorgeous. So I'm pumping their tyres the whole time. Agents don't want to deal with negative people. As an agent, I got told all the time, third bedroom's too small, mate. Can't find a car park out the front. Oh, it's bloody noisy here. Or, they drop whatever. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, I won't sell it to you. Thank you so much for letting me know that. I'm the agent. I'm here more than you. I know what all the faults are. I don't have to say that out loud, but you're off my list. Straight away. So when someone comes through and makes a point of difference about being very positive about the asset, that gets me a front row seat to the negotiation. Yeah, and people want to deal with me, and that goes back to one of my other key things, which is rapport. Yeah, so I work really closely with the agents in that regard later. But in terms of your anchor point, when I do introduce it, it has to be done up front. So it's more relatable, it's more real when you casually drop it into the conversation at the start, and then you circle back to it days or a week later, because then it's like, oh, yeah, actually, no, I do remember you did tell me that. And I can reference that on the call. Remember how I said to you on Friday, we're already a long way down the road on Roseville? Well, that's come to a head. Look, don't blame me. It's off market. The agent's saying to me, if we don't sign unconditionally by tomorrow, they're going to put it on the open market. We don't want to lose that. However, I've got time pressure, so I can't do much here. I can get an unconditional offer to you this afternoon. And also I'll use lines in that point to match my anchoring and say, look, I'm going to come in, with your permission, I'm going to come in with just my strongest offer up front, because I don't want to play any games. I respect you're busy, I'm busy. We don't want to lose it. We're just going to have a crack at it, and then we'll jog on straight away to Roseville. So I just keep referencing Roseville in that instance and keep pushing that there's time pressure here. So I'm reversing the fear of loss, right? So now I'm putting the pressure back on the seller, because the agent's just going to circle back and say, okay, great. Well, look, Scott's come in with his buyers. We're quoting 3.5. He's coming at 4 million and 25. Look, it is a really good offer. So I had that agent calling me on the Monday saying, and I'll ask her this outright, where are we at? Do you support my offer? So am I fighting you and the seller and the competition? And she said, no, I'm supporting the offer. I'm telling them to take it. Great. Okay, so now I know it's just down to competition. So, and because they'll do their job, any good agent's going to take that offer, get offer and acceptance, and then do the phone around. And we got mowed down. Someone paid more than 4.1 million. But at 4 million and 25, someone came in. in her words yesterday, way over 4.1. So in your point there, are they using a buyer's agent that didn't ask any questions, that just wanted to close it out and get it done? Or are they just an uneducated buyer that's overpaid for it when they didn't have to? If they asked a couple of key questions, they would have established that I told the agent, you can disclose my offer. I don't care less. Yeah, disclose it because I want to wrap this whole thing up in 24 hours, not in 2 weeks. Yeah, and if someone's going to beat me, they're going to beat me anyway. So tell them what the benchmark is they've got to beat. And I like doing that because when they're quoting 3.5 and you've got 4.025 on it, most buyers run to the hills because they're like, this is going to go even further than that, so I'm out, rather than get emotionally invested in the process.
So the time pressure is a great strategy, right? Because it keeps you in control and you're in control of the speed process as well. How often for you where the agent isn't just going to play along? Like, in other words, even if Roseville is still on the go for you and you put a 24-hour deadline on it, which is the tactic there is to obviously, if they don't have enough time to get to those other buyers, but they're supporting the deal. So how many of those where it falls over and the agent basically says, look, I just don't have time to get to the other buyer, so I'm just going to, you're just going to have to go for Roseville or whatever it might be.
Yep. Often,
yeah,
it's a simple answer.
Yep.
And I think this is the thing as well that I can't stand in terms of the Instagram marketing buyers agents is that there's these one theories that work all the time. It doesn't. I've got a whole arsenal of things that I'll lean on.
Exactly.
I don't win every deal. We talked about this before about market value and quantifying the savings that I can make. I'll say to my clients when I'm signing them on, listen, there's negotiation wins. That's what I'm proud of. That's what I can talk about till the cows come home. But what you also need to know is sometimes I'm going to win a deal for you and not save you $1. And that's going to be a massive win. And some of those wins are bigger than the $50,000 savings that you see from these other marketers on Instagram. It's not about the dollar saving. It's about getting you the asset that you want or the right investment vehicle and paying the right price for it. And sometimes I'm going to be pushed right to your limit, to that target price, and I'm going to win it in buying competition, and that's just as big as winner getting 50 grand off. So that you got to weigh up those things as well. But yeah, it doesn't always win is a simple answer. And the way that this is actually a good question because the buyers will say to me, oh, well, if you've told them that, what happens if I don't, what happens when they say no? And I'm like, well, that's easy because what will happen is we'll go off for 24 hours or 48 hours, and then I'll circle back and say, we went for Roseville. It was full of, termite issues. And we're back on this.
There's potentially
I can crash any deal
and whether that's you're hopefully working on a truth serum in terms of like the building pest didn't stack up, or we found out something about the street, or there's an easement that we that wasn't quite notified on the contract. So there's plenty of different angles there in terms of
And the one key thing to understand here for consumers is the agents do not give a shit. That is the all-encompassing, most important thing. I could say whatever I wanted to say to an agent. I can circle back and say something completely different. They do not care. All they care about is, do I have another buyer in the race here, or can I get this deal across the line and get paid? They do not care what the dialogue is, or the rhetoric, or the timing. So it's all they'll laugh it off and just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't want to, if you're going to plan to buy several properties in that area and have a reasonable reputation in the market. Like again, you don't want to be an antagonistic buyer's agent.
No,
that is a road to basically no purchases, no opportunities, no off markets or pre-markets as part of that story. Right.
And none of what I do is aggressive.
Yes.
None of it.
Well,
so
everything
it's always done with a smile on my face, building rapport with the agent.
Talk to that, because the rapport is important, right? But for a lot of our listeners, can you help them understand a couple of things? One, how you build the rapport, why that's important. But because if someone's listening to this and they don't have 30 years of experience and they're just about to go and enter into the game for the first time, they're in this, how much information do I give? I can't give them my full budget. If I give them my full budget, there's negotiators have got ways of separating budget from where we see value, but also how much information to give and also being able to signal to the agent that you're interested so that you don't get a surprise that it's done without you. So I wonder if you could speak to some of the little nuances around clearly we'd love them to use negotiators, right? And you being an expert in this game, but for those who are trying to understand how it works, what little nuggets would you give them just to try and unlock rapport, giving them enough information so they treat you as seriously, being able to jockey for position, even though they might know you've got one to spend, but you don't see value past 950. Some of those conversations.
Yeah, so buyers are really coy in terms of the information that they'll get because they're just so they've been tarnished, right, by the agents. By dealing with agents, that relationship is not good. They're sick of the underquoting. They don't like the agent game playing. They don't like the egos and the fast cars and the sharp suits and all the rest of it. So they've naturally got,
skepticism.
Their barrier up about the information they give across. But agents need to work with real numbers, and they're for me, when I was an agent, if someone was upfront with me and I understood what they're going to spend, they're not going to waste my time. If I know you got $1 million, I'm not going to show you properties at $1,050,000, vice versa, right? But most buyers can't do that, and they can't clearly define what they're looking for. So part of what I do is define the client brief down to 5 ironclad, non-negotiable bullet points, crystal clear that an agent can read on the run, because they meet 200 of you every week, so you're not special. No disrespect to you or the next Joneses, but you're not special. Yeah. So an agent's going to play the card that's in front of them, that's a buyer ready to sign an unconditional contract. So you've got to be that buyer. And part of that is disclosing how much money you've got, and then, as you say, changing the conversation straight away from budget to value. Yeah, and I address that in the very first phone call. So I would, to this point, I would ring up and say, Bryce, clients have just come through and had a look at 12 Smith Street. Mate, they love the house. Great spot, blah, 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 all the things we just talked about before. I see you got it on at 999 grand. As you know, they've got $1 million to spend. Actually, they could probably spend about 1.2, 1.3. We didn't say that, but they've got a lot bigger budget if something better comes up. They just prefer not to spend it. Instantly gone. Never again do we talk about their budget. They'll never, ever ask me about it ever again. No. I've just told them they got more money, but they ain't going to spend it on this house. And now I'm going to tell you all the reasons why it ain't worth $999. Let's go. Yeah, that's the start of the negotiation. So I address that elephant in the room instantly in the first conversation as soon as I pick up the phone to say, let's start negotiating.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned those 5 points. Do you want to share what those 5 qualifying things are?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's minimum land size. Minimum bedrooms, bathrooms, anything that's a must-have in terms of an aspect or whatever that might be, and a really defined location. So are you buying in Surrey Hills, or are you buying in the eastern part of Surrey Hills on the flat streets between Phelps and Arthur? Yeah. Whatever that might be, get specific.
Because what's your split of owner-occupier purchases versus investment purchases? You're predominantly owner-occupier?
Last month it was 50-50. Most months it's probably 20-80 towards investors.
Okay.
But it changes all the time for me. So my focus at the moment is on investors. That's kind of where my next sort of business is going.
Yep.
But I still do a lot of owner-occupiers, typically in major capital cities that are buying and buying their own principal place of residence.
Let's talk about why buyers trying to jockey agents in a negotiation around comparable sales is flawed.
Yeah. So as an agent, your job is to be the absolute expert on product knowledge. Yep. So at Belle Property in Surrey Hills, we would go through, make a point of going through every one of our competitors' listings. So we'd physically inspect them. Yep. And we would go to all the auctions. We would have one person from our team at every auction of our competitors. We'd work out who the registered bidders were, what they bid up to, and we would record all that in our CRM system. Yep. When you come along to me on in a negotiation and Bryce says, I've fallen in love with 12 Smith Street, but it's not as good as 12 Jones Street or whatever, I'd have a list of other properties that would crush your comparable sales because you physically haven't done the research that I have. Yeah. So we made it our point like that, so that it was very difficult for you to win an argument about comparable sales evidence. So it's better to talk about why a particular property works for your needs, or where in that you're prepared to pay a premium for the location needs that are important to you, or the right school zone, or whatever those things are, or the quality of a renovation or something like that, rather than just kind of spurting off comparable sales evidence. So agents will crush you if they're any good and they're good local agents.
To your point, they've got the reps in, right? What about multiple offer strategies? So you've, I know you've got a few, but for a lot of people, that's where, if you're dealing and it's one-off, fine. But when you've got competing interest, that's where you get paid for what you do.
Yep, it's really hard is a simple answer to that. Expressions of interest is something that we used to do a lot as agents to take price out of the equation, and you'd have huge disparities in terms of where people landed. People would just overpay significantly, and it was those ones that had been in the market for the longest that potentially stopped the fight and overpay. So EOI worked really well for us in Sydney, especially on properties with views or that were unique, because it's very difficult to price that view, and too big variance on for different parties. Probably the number one tool that I would use to answer this question is asking for the final right of refusal from an agent, right? So I would say to them, let's just use an auction for an example, which often ends up in a pre-auction bidding war and sealed bids, or you call it in here a
boardroom
auction in Melbourne. I would go in hard with my offer, and I would say to the agent in that regard, listen, we want to buy this, go through all the preference and all the other keywords and pump up their tyres. It's really important my client buys this. They love the house. They've been looking for X amount of days, whatever. So they're not going to waste your time. They're genuine. They're ready to go, and they're unconditional, right? So we're going to come in with a no BS offer. We're going to go straight for the throat. Yeah. I want to ask you a favour. I'm going to start that process with your permission, and I'm going to go in really hard. Yeah. And of course, we're not going we know what it's worth. The hard is just giving them, the think that they're
not the bottom of the range.
Yeah.
Definitely
They think it's a really good knockout punch.
Solid first.
It's a solid offer, which you have to do. You can't pretend yourself that you're buying. All these people that are lowballing and win. It just doesn't work in most markets in Australia. Not if you're buying a good quality asset in a sought after location. Lowballing is for losers.
Yeah.
So you go in at the right number. But what I'd ask your permission for, Bryce, in that situation is, look, I've sat in your chair for 23 years. Deep empathy for what you've got to do. Totally understand you're going to run a competitive process. That's your job. You're a great agent. You've been doing this for a long time. Been following you for ages. Good to finally work with you, Bryce. Let's get a deal across the line, mate. There's many more of these ones to come. Now, Bryce, I want to ask you a favour. I'm going to come in and try to make this job for you really simple and shorten the time that it's going to take you to do this. So I'm going to come in with a knockout punch. I'm really happy for you to disclose that offer. So it just makes it nice and simple. I believe in transparency, and wherever it lands, hopefully we're the winners. What I'd ask of you, though, is if you run a process, can you be really clear on how that process is going to be run? Yep, okay, Scott, we're going to go, it's Saturday afternoon. It's sealed bids by 4 o'clock in my office tomorrow afternoon. Sure, okay, cool. So final bids by 4 o'clock on Sunday, no probs. Can I ask you a favour then, Bryce? Can you ring me at 3:55 after you've exhausted every other buyer and give me the final right of refusal? And out of respect, I'll either pay it if it's within our parameters to do so and within our budget, and of course your vendor's going to get the highest price, or I'll tell you no straight away and you'll sell it for the highest price anyway. You got nothing to lose. What do you think about that? And I'd say 60% of the agents would say yes, which just baffles me.
Especially if they've said best and final. At the very start of those negotiations.
Why does it baffle you though when you've actually made the transparency of giving you the right of refusal?
Because they're giving someone a free kick, right? And they haven't exhausted everybody, if that's the case. They've exhausted, semi-exhausted us, but haven't exhausted anyone else, really, in the grand scheme of things. So I think they're being lazy in doing that, and they shouldn't give you that free kick, but I'm not going to knock it back.
So that's part of your judgment call in terms of having some cadence with that agent, though, in terms of knowing whether they're susceptible to being transactional or trying to do the right thing by their vendor.
Yeah, and it just makes the whole process easier. Like, my client doesn't stress then for 2 days, or while that process runs out, because they know they're going to get a final shot at it. And given how hard we work on defining what their target price is up front, they've got no regrets. If it goes $1 over that, they knew we played the game of what's your walk away number, and they're happy. In terms of the building rapport bit, which we didn't sort of touch on before, I think one of the things that's missed by a lot of buyers in Australia is that you're dealing with so many different personalities, right? So you might have the young hotshot cokehead in the eastern suburbs in Sydney that, is all about ego and needs...
That's the reality of
it.
Yeah.
The reality of it. They need their back scratched and...
You showed us the text message earlier on...
Yeah. And then you've got, the grandma that's in the regional area or whatever like that that's doing this, and everywhere in between. And it's my job as the negotiator there that's representing the client to find a way to get to their level. Yeah, because I don't want to come across as pushy or brash, which some people might think. You talk fast, you're from the big city, you're all about ego, whatever. I try to take that out of it and just to try and soften those edges and find my feet in terms of who I'm dealing with. And it's important because then I can start to have... a relationship with them briefly on the phone where I can get to know them a little bit better. And it might be just things like, Bryce, I might just talk about the kids or whatever if I know that you've got kids, or I ask you a couple of questions or something like that. And I drop in certain things in conversations, and I might have a laugh about what kids do, or the grandkids, or the car that you're driving if you're the fast kid in the city, or whatever it might be. I have to find a way to get to their level. One of the ones in Sydney that I did that exact trick with, in terms of asking for the final right of refusal, it's not trick but tool, was probably a prime example of building rapport that I use as a story as well. High profile Sydney agent, I'd never dealt with him. We probably knew each other's names from seeing them in the paper all the time, but I'd never dealt with him at all. Rang him up. There's a hot property that my client wanted to buy. It was going to auction. It was before the first weekend. Clients knew the location back to front, absolutely knew they wanted to buy the house. It was in the prime spot for them. So we'd done all the research. So the first thing I did was like, okay, how do I build rapport with this hotshot Sydney agent? So I rang him up and I said, John, let's put some new wheels on your Bentley. And he's like, what? I was like, I don't even know if you got a Bentley. I'm just going to get you some, that was my line to like make him laugh and stop. And then he had a crackle, and then we just kept, like, I knew that he wanted to have a laugh. And then what I realised with this is they just deal with dry people that are highly emotional and negative all day. That's what I did as a job as an estate agent. So when someone comes along and is bubbly and fun and wants to make it engaging, he said yes straight away to I'll give you the last right of refusal. Let's get a deal done. Let's put some new wheels on my Bentley. And it just became the joke, we laughed about. And he didn't even have a Bentley or whatever. He probably had 3 of them, but who knows? And he certainly didn't need cash from me to put new wheels on there, but he liked the process.
Wonderful. Now, obviously, we can talk about this all day. This is one of my favourite topics to talk about. I want to change pace just a fraction before we finish up. Obviously, when you were at Belle Property, you knew the market, that asymmetry of information. You had it, you knew the market. If you're going into a new market, I've heard you talk about it takes between, say, 4 to 8 weeks for you to really understand a market. Because we've got a lot of buyer's agents who say, well, all of these borderless buyer's agents can't assess a market or know how to analyse a market. We've got more access to data than we've ever had before, so that asymmetry to data is definitely collapsing. What are the sort of some of the tactics and processes you use to get up to speed in a market when you're going into a new area to buy that property?
So I want to understand deal flow, so volume.
Yep.
So how hard it is going to be to replicate those assets, what the turnover rate is. So I'm looking at sold properties, I'm looking at current listings, I'm looking at under offer properties. I'm speaking to the under offer properties to establish what those latest sale prices are as well, when I'm using those as comparable sales evidence. I'm tracking auction results. I'm tracking what agents are guiding versus what those eventual sale prices are, so I can get a gauge of what the spread is in terms of the underquoting or what people are paying in terms of a premium. And if I can, I'm tracking buyer depth, understanding how many people are competing at those auctions as well. Yeah. So that's a high level of detail, but you could easily do that in a 4 to 8 week period. And I used to say to my clients all the time that the ideal scenario is that you don't start negotiating until you've physically inspected 50 properties. Yeah. And most people just don't get anywhere near 50. So you might look at 10 or 12, on average.
If it's interstate, have you got a team on the phone who's saying, hey, great result on that auction on the weekend, how many registered bidders did you have? Is that sort of how you're building that sort of story out?
We're tracking that in areas that we're heavily focused on. If we're buying.
You've got more volume to buy as opposed to
very difficult to buy if someone a negotiation as a service customer and says, hey, I want to buy in whoop this afternoon. Yeah. Well, then I've got to use my skill set to analyse that market as quickly as possible. But what we did from an accountability perspective at Haus was for every analysis that we ran, we tracked the eventual sale price benchmarked against what we analysed it at. We would do an analysis sight unseen back to the client within 3 hours. And for 7 years, I had an accuracy rating of 2% on the conservative side.
Yeah.
That's an incredible level of detail.
Well, so to give our listeners some idea of what that spread normally would be, it's 4 to 5%.
There you go.
If you've got, so you're basically 50% better or 100% better than what those things are. And that's what any decent buyer's agent should do. I've got folders of markets that, and I would, back in the day, pre-internet, where I literally folder after folder of markets and properties that I would watch and study to get that type of data. These days, we're very fortunate to have
good tools.
All of those fed into a research platform to be able to do that. But I think it's a really important point. So if you're starting out, or if you're a punter that wants to do this yourself, and our community is obviously full of punters that want to do it themselves, you've got to track those results and you've got to test yourself in terms of, okay, I'm going to comp this up, and then what does it roll? And if you're getting within 2%, that's pretty sharp in terms of what that looks like.
Most people can't tell where the value pockets are within the suburbs or where they've got to pay a premium, and that's where they fall short all the time. So I would list a property and say, it's offers over $1 million or whatever, knowing that it's going to get to 1.2 compared to what a 3-bed might sell for $1.05 million somewhere else in the suburb. But the people can't get past $1.05 million or $1.70 million or whatever, because they don't understand that there's a premium in this eastern side of the suburb because it's flat streets, wider roads, tree lined, in the best school zone, all these things.
We've got heat map research now by SA1 level, which is 150 properties in a tight concentration, and we can heat map that instantly. So we can say in any suburb across Australia, this is the best street.
Yep.
And this is the best pocket as a starting point before we then go out and do that field research, which validates that point, because the best properties in that area are usually selling at the highest price point, right?
Yeah, and using that sort of HEX data as well, you get to a point where now you can also track median rental growth in those street level data.
Correct.
You can see who your neighbours are in terms of renters and owner-occupiers. So there's just so much more information. So this is where going it alone, if you don't understand what's out there, you don't know what you don't know. And that's so dangerous that there's a high risk that you're easily going to overspend the cost of a buyer's agent's fee.
Hey, Scott, the time is flying, and there's so many questions that I feel like we haven't covered today. So I'm trying to think about, as my final question for you, which is the one that I'd like to do. And I want to leave you with this one. Why is your strategy of talking to an agent by saying, what's it going to take to buy it? Why is that such an important question? And why is it a question that a lot of amateurs don't understand the power of?
Because it instantly cuts through and gets directly to the point, so that I can move on from a property really quickly, or double down and chase hard if it's the right asset inside the parameters that we've got to spend. And it also gives me an indication really quickly to be able to read whether the agent's going to be a liar to deal with, or whether they're going to play it with a straight bat. So it does a lot of heavy lifting.
Give us the examples that flush that out for you up front.
Well, you might be quoting offers over 800,000. So say, great, blah, 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 it's my preference, we like it, all those other things to build rapport with you. And then I'll say, so just double checking, you're saying over 8. So what does that mean, Bryce? So what buys it? Well, mate, it's over 8. We're just starting we haven't even had anyone through there. Okay, great. So, would 810 sort of buy? What is that? What over 8 means? What, 810, 850? What kind of number are you thinking? Oh, yeah, look, it's probably going to go closer to that kind of low to mid 8s. Okay, so more than that kind of 835 range kind of thing. I'm just trying to set this up so I don't waste your time or mine with my clients. Have you had any offers on the property yet? What's the highest offer you've rejected? Yeah, and sometimes they'll tell me that or not. Okay, so now what we're saying is you've got an offer of 837,000. Okay, cool. And look, what's the vendor's dream price? What did they counter offer at? 860. Okay, cool. So 860 buys it today, or somewhere in between 837 and 860. Oh, look, 860, I know he gets it over the line, somewhere between that two. Okay, cool. Is the 837 exhausted? Are they still there? They're still going? Yeah. Oh, no, they're out at 837. Okay, cool. All right. So, and then I'll bait them and say, okay, great. Well, look, it's a shame they're at 860 because we can't get to 860. We've just been in another negotiation and I got them to 830. I reckon I can probably push them to 840. Again, if the comparable's there, if I'm happy to pay 840, I'm not going to throw those lines out if I'm not. Yep. But I reckon I can probably push them to that number, but I might need you to work at the other end for me to try and get this done. Do you think you have half a chance at 840 if I can get my client to that number? Yeah, and then just start that conversation. So we've gone from offers over 8 to now probably 840 to 860 is going to buy it, and we've got a clear line to the finish to get this over, without potentially any other negotiation to compete against. It's just it's trying to get as many data points as I possibly can, and more information than any other buyer's got, and as quickly as possible.
And you've got to have a lot of front, right? You've been in the trenches. You've developed a thick skin. You've developed a non-personal attitude to negotiations, and I think that's a reminder for our listeners that it's a game. You're stepping over the line, you're saying things, you're doing things, you're flushing out agent motives, you're trying to understand body language, you're trying to see responses, you're trying to see hesitation. There's all this stuff going on, and none of it's personal. It is just...
No.
It is just... But
some of it is. I like crushing their little souls.
But you can actually... But to the point...
Depends who I'm up against.
The point is that...
that important human connection and that rapport building.
The point is that the buyers take it as personal. They get nervous.
Invested.
They're worried about the rejection. Like, when you've done enough of these things, you've got to get the frame that, imagine you were being rejected on the 1,000th time and you're expecting it, you'd respond differently to the first time. So there's an element of being in the game and in the trenches for a buyer's agent that just the average buyer.
And there's a confidence that comes from that gives my customers a lot of, puts them at ease, right? Because I will lose more often than I'll win, just like any good negotiator does if they're having lots of shot on goals.
Yeah.
That's the honest truth, right? Yeah. And if you're not asking those questions, you're not going to know. So I ask those questions, and then I can confidently say to my client, there's no value there, walk away. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, good, because otherwise they would have doubled down and had a shot at it and lost anyway, and wasted time, wasted money, wasted heartache. So it's that level of confidence that you take away from the rejections as well that helps the customer on their journey, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the other ones I've heard you talk about is, from a question and a prompting question point of view, is, are the sellers ready to sell today?
Yep.
You're also, again, you're trying to get speed to information, speed to answer. How do you set that up as part of that sort of framing that you're doing when you're in that conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you go back to that example that we just used, that we got 840 to 860 as a range, I can push hard to then unconditional exchange or conditional exchange, depending on where you are, at a level that would work if it's within the parameters. But if they're not ready to sell, then my offer that I make is just going to get used against me.
Correct.
Right? So I have to establish what the ground rules are, what the process is from that agent to run that offer. Yeah. So I need to know, okay, great. Well, if I offer 840, Bryce, what are you going to do with that 840? Like, what's the next step from here? So if I can get you 840 and your clients accept it, is there no further negotiation? Are we exchanging today? Will we exchange by 3 o'clock? Yeah. Are your clients in town? Are they away on holidays? Can they sign a digital contract, or are they, old school, they need wet signature, which often happens, right? Yeah. So I need to know those things before I then go, okay, great, well, we're at 840 now. Let's go. Let's dance. We're there. Let's get this wrapped up. Yeah, and I need to know that the client is motivated and ready to sell. And often I'll ask that question, and then the agents will say, "No, they're not. They're not, mate. I pumped this up way too much to get this listing." And they'll be honest. This is the beauty of being a third party in the transaction.
Yeah.
And someone that used to be in the game as well. The agent's like, "Oh no, I cooked this. Like, I've gone in 100 grand too much on this. There's no buyer interest at that level. Like, they're going to need this Saturday and probably next Saturday as well before it. And just hang with me, and I'll get it to that point, and then I'll use your offer, and we'll try and get this thing done. But I need some time here to do the heavy lifting, and that's good, because that means, okay, great. Well, I'll park that, keep looking for other properties, and we'll circle back to that one and have another go at it. But then often when I get to that level, I'll go, do you know what? I'm not at 840 anymore. We just don't see value at that level. We're at 825, because your 837's not there either, I don't reckon. And so I'll use that again as a negotiation point. If they need time, well, then that time just costs them some money. Potentially.
Yeah.
Can't always dictate terms.
Sort of reverse sell it.
Yeah, and in a fast market, speed's a weapon. So most people aren't prepared to move at the pace that the professionals are prepared to move at anyway. So
Now look, my final question as we wrap this up is, what have we missed? What would you love to tell the community? I mean, there's lots, right? I mean, this is an art form. It's a whole industry within itself in terms of negotiation. Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with that we haven't sort of touched on?
I don't know. It's a hard question, because there is just so much, and we jumped around everywhere. I think if you're going to do it yourself, I think the key things for me is being really honest with yourself about what your budget affords you in your local market. So before you go out seeing homes, before you start making offers, understand what you can actually buy and be realistic.
Yeah, okay.
Understand how to use the sold section of realestate.com to say, okay, well, I've put in my parameters of what I dream to own, but realise that in the last 30 days, those properties are actually 100 square metres smaller, 1 bedroom less, and in the 2 suburbs next to where I ideally want to be. So that if I am going to be realistic with my search, I need to focus on searching in the right location so I can find it. So that alone is going to cut, I'd say, 2/3 out of the time it takes to buy a property.
And wasted weekends.
Yeah.
Mate, as we said, we could talk for ages.
Yes.
Clearly, our audience is going to benefit from, if they didn't get at least 1 or 2 nuggets from that, they weren't really listening. But, mate, on behalf of everyone here on the Property Couch, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Well, there you go, Ben. Well, it's, when we first set up the couch, we made a very deliberate decision to leave an extra spot so we can invite people like Scott onto the couch, and didn't disappoint today. There was lots of really amazing gold that we got to share.
Yeah, I mean, I love the learnings that our community gets, and a couple of the key takeaways for me: if you're going to try and do this yourself, then you're going to have to practice, all right? Because ultimately you're playing with huge amounts of money, so you want to be able to get it right. But it also did showcase to me that there is a level of art and professionalism that even amateurs, it takes time to build that up. So like in any sort of industry, sport or whatever, you've got your amateurs and then you're moving through to your pros, and Scott's an absolute pro. And so you can see the advantages that you get out of dealing with a pro, because they can think on their feet. They can make the conversations go in the directions that they need to go because they are trained as negotiators and they've built that skill up.
Yeah, what a buyer's agent has is they've just got the reps. They've seen it before. They understand. We talk about it all the time. Real estate is an insider's game. You just got to be able to witness a conversation that just showed exactly why it is an insider's game. And when you're just sort of dabbling in once every 7 years on average, you can largely see why you're up against it. So a very special thanks to Scott for sharing his wisdom, coming on and sharing it with our community. And we are confident that, folks, if you're going out to negotiate this weekend or in the next couple of weeks, you should be taking a different approach based on what you heard today. So, Ben, but it's always fun getting in studio in particular, which is a lot of fun, mate. But until next week.
Well, that's a wrap, Bryce, isn't it? So knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it.
See you next week, folks.